Welcome to The Brain Changers, a podcast about learning how to revolutionize the way you think and live by mastering your mind. We're your hosts, mother and daughter duo Rebecca and Yvonne King from Moonbeam Monday. Our goal is to empower you to live the life you choose by teaching you how to retrain your brain. Some people tell us it sounds like mind control, and it is, but not the way you might think. This is about you taking control of your own mind rather than letting your mind control you, so you can choose to live a life free from the expectations of others. No matter what you've experienced in the past, you can create positive change and transformation by learning how to master your mind. We know this because we've done it. Between us, we've survived cancer and stroke and eliminated debilitating anxiety and depression. We've turned our pain into purpose through the power of our mind, and we're now here to support and guide you to do the same. In this podcast, we share valuable insights about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, how to begin the process of change, and why it's necessary. Because we know that when you change your mind, you change your life. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Well, welcome to episode number 2 of The Brain Changers. We are so happy to be here with you. And today we're exploring a topic that often baffles many. So it's the difference between the mind and the brain. Now, we're going to uncover how understanding the difference can empower us to live better and more balanced lives. So we're going to start with the basics today. Now, many people use the terms mind and brain interchangeably, but they really are quite different. And Mum, how would you describe the brain?
Well, Beck, if we think of the brain as the physical entity inside our skull, it's commonly thought that we have 100 billion neurons. That's a big number, isn't it?
Huge.
But in fact, it's probably closer to about 86 billion cells or neurons. Neurons being the cells that transmit the information between our brain and other parts of the central nervous system. However, you look at it though, it's a huge number, and it helps to think of it this way. The latest estimates for the number of stars in our Milky Way are somewhere between 200 and 400 billion. Now, when we think of the Milky Way, we just think of it as immense, don't we? Incalculable in actual fact. So in comparison to the amount of neurons in the brain, it really is quite a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So then our brain is the physical structure that facilitates everything we do. You could liken it to a computer and the operating system that drives it.
Yeah, okay. So that's a great analogy. So what you mean is that so we might be doing something in the foreground, but actually there's other things happening behind the scenes that we're not even aware of until we become aware. Yeah.
That's right. Then we start thinking about the mind. Now, the mind is more like the software that runs the hardware. If you think of your computer again, you've got the hardware, but then you have to install software to run the programs that you want to run on your computer.
Yeah.
So it's the mind is not something that you can touch. It more refers to a mental faculty that manifests as our sense of perception. It's how we personally perceive things, how we personally think, our sensations, how we receive sensory information, the way we reason, and the memories that we build up over our lifetime. So it's very individual and personal to us.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And like you say, this manifestation of all of these things, it's very different for everyone. And that's the reason that we all have a different roadmap, if I can call it that. a roadmap of our world. And that explains why the perception of our memories of the same or similar events will be different for everyone.
Exactly. And this is a concept that first triggered my interest in the brain and the way it works. I always used to puzzle me, actually. We can all see the same event. Maybe a good example of this is witnessing maybe a road accident.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are called to court to give an eyewitness account, and yet they can all be different. Their perception of what happened is different. So this is a concept that I always found very fascinating. And it's interesting because, it was once thought that the brain stopped developing after childhood. But thankfully, we now understand that the brain can change at any age.
Yeah.
But perhaps, Beck, you can explain for our listeners an overview of how it's possible for the brain to change.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where things start to get really interesting, I think. It's due to a process called neuroplasticity. And in its simplest terms, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself, both in structure and in function throughout our life. And that's based on our personal experiences. So going back to what you said, this is why we all have a different perception of things. So it's like your brain is constantly rewiring itself to adapt to new situations. And that's why we talk about learning how to rewire your brain or retrain your brain. And it does this by creating new neural pathways and losing those ones which are no longer used. So this is actually a process with a name. It's called neural pruning.
I like that description, Beck. Now, for those of our listeners who are gardeners, I think that this will probably be an easy concept to understand. When we think of pruning the roses, for example, we know that a rose bush can survive without annual pruning, but it's going to become weak, poorly formed, and the fruit or its blooms won't be as abundant or as big and beautiful without that pruning. So it's going to look neglected and also be prone to pests and disease. So pruning removes all these dead and diseased canes. It triggers new buds and new vigorous canes to form. So when this pruning happens, it strengthens the actual bush and improves it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I really like that way of thinking. Now, as you know, I mean, I love my garden, but I wouldn't call myself a fabulous gardener. In fact, I have killed bamboo in the past. But I really like that explanation, and it's starting to, even as somebody who understands this, I really like hearing different analogies, and that one's really brought it home to me. So, yeah, if we can relate this to our brains, neural pruning is the removal of redundant or otherwise unnecessary synaptic connections. So, on the other hand, neuroplasticity is the way in which our brain can adapt to changes in our environment because we're in constant, our environment is under constant change. I think there's a saying, the only constant is change.
That's right.
So, this will be based on what we think or our thought patterns or our feelings, and of course, the choices that we make throughout our life. And then additionally, every time that you learn something new or you change a habit, because we all change habits, whether we do it, whether we mean to change a habit or whether it's just something that changes over time, and this changes the structure of your brain. So these neural pathways that we're using often strengthen, like you said. So the more that we prune, the stronger they become, or the more we use these things, the more we do these things, the stronger they become. And those that aren't being used die off from lack of use. So this is why managing our mind effectively can lead to these profound changes that we talk about, not just mentally, but physically in our brain's architecture.
That's an interesting thought, Beck. Can you give an example of what this might look like in our lives?
Yeah. So the way that I like to describe this is using the analogy of a forest path. And a lot of people have heard this analogy, so I'll use it because it's quite common. But if you think about it, when you decide to go on a hike, for example, you go somewhere, you park the car, you're in the car park, and there's the entrance to the path, and it says, your destination is this way, follow this track. And you can see the opening to the track. You can see that it's a well-worn path. There's probably trees. If it's through a forest, there's going to be trees on either side. There's going to be lots of, bushland on the ground, but you can clearly see where you're going. So it's very easy, give or take a few hills, to get where it is that you're going. It's signposted. But if you want to reach a different destination, you're going to have to find a different path. So if you're at the entrance to that original path and you sort of look over to the right-hand side and you go, well, actually, I want to go to a destination in that direction. There's no path. I need some tools because I'm going to have to create my own path. So that might involve hacking away some bushes, tramping on the ground to clear the ground cover, and really making your way through so that you can get to a new destination. Now, once you get there, you're going to walk back and forth on that path to make sure that it's well worn so that you can see where it is again, and so that it's easier to follow that path. And once you start following that path more and more and more, when you look back to the left and you look at that original path that you walked down, you can see that the trees have started to grow over, the ground cover has started to consume that path, and it's no longer easy to find your way to that original destination. So this is the example that I love to give. So just as the brain can reorganize itself after a brain injury, such as an accident or a stroke, depending on the area of the brain that has been damaged, of course, our brains can also change through the creation of these new neural networks. So, and like we said, the more often that it's used, the easier it is to find, because the neurons that are frequently used develop stronger connections, and those that are rarely used will eventually die.
Okay, I think this really begins to reinforce our understanding of how we can actually change our habits, change our thinking, change our beliefs. If we use something often, or a neural pathway often, it will be strengthened and reinforced.
Yeah.
And if we stop using or thinking in a certain way, that will be pruned. It will die off and gone forever. That's a really good analogy, Beck.
Yeah, thank you. It's not mine. I didn't come up with it. It is a commonly used one, but I think it's also really, it's important for us to be able to help the people that we work with, and those of you who are listening, to really visualize this. So I want to give you an example of how this works. We're talking about the things that we say, the choices that we make, our feelings. So an example of this is perhaps negative thought processes. So we're all really familiar with that inner critic that we have. We've got, or some people call it that mean girl. Everybody's familiar with that movie. We've all got this these negative thought processes, things like, I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough. I'm sure everybody listening can relate to this in some way. Now, when those neurons are repeatedly fired, this belief becomes stronger. These are beliefs. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough. So this belief becomes stronger the more we say it to ourselves. And if we make a conscious decision to replace this thought with, I'm okay, or I can do this, or I can learn to do this, I am good enough, eventually this neural pathway will strengthen, just like the rose bush, and it will replace our old ways of thinking.
I've had a similar experience with that kind of thinking, and I noticed what you said there when you use those thoughts of "I'm not good enough" or "I can't do this." Like that, those neural pathways. The more we say it, the more reinforced that thought is going to become.
Yeah.
So, if we want to change our thinking, we've got to turn that around. And I had an experience, as I have said earlier in this podcast series, about coming face to face with a life-threatening disease. Now, there are two ways of handling it. You can either think the worst is going to happen, or you can turn that around and think of what outcome you would like to have. Reinforce that thought. And not allow yourself to think of the worst case scenario, but to keep reinforcing the best that you could hope for, and reinforce that daily so that it becomes your reality. I think you've quoted this often, Beck, Gandhi's saying that our thoughts become our reality, and our reality eventually becomes our legacy.
Yeah.
So what we think and is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many ways that we can turn this around, which we're going to be sharing lots of this in future episodes, but it really brings a whole new level to that meaning, to that saying, mind over matter, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
That's what we've learned today, isn't it? Now, we know now that the brain can adapt. We can always learn. Our brains are adaptable to change throughout our lifetime. And new learning and different environment can strengthen the synapses, which are the small gaps at the end of the neuron that allow the signal to pass from one neuron to the next. And this can happen by learning a new way to think or a new way to do something, but it's a continual reinforcement of this new habit.
Yeah, and talking about habits, because I've got all these things flooding into my mind, because I'm sure people are sitting there going, well, hang on a second, I've got this habit. Is this what's happening? So, even a simple example of biting our nails, that is something that becomes a habit. We don't bite our nails for any particular reason. Like, there might be something that triggers it, that we're nervous or afraid, whatever the reason is, to begin with. And if we want to change that habit, we need to know what that root cause is. But ultimately, it then becomes a habit. And so when we change the way that we think about it, we can shift that new habit. We can replace it with something else that we would rather do. So I guess summarizing that, using our language as an example here is one of the easiest ways to explain this. And it's important to know, like you said, taking a bit of Gandhi's quote there, that our thoughts create our reality. Our brain doesn't know what's real or what's imagined. And that blew my mind when I learned that, for sure. So it is really important to pay attention to our thoughts and what we say. And that's not just externally. That's not just the words that we use talking to other people. This is our internal language. And actually, our internal language is the most important. So like we were talking about before, if I continually tell myself that I'm not good enough, my brain will believe this, and it will find evidence for all the times that has been true, where I haven't been good enough or where I haven't been able to complete something. So, and it will believe this. So I can change this, or I can do some neural pruning by changing what I say to myself, and also changing what I tell other people, what I say to other people. And so when I do this, my brain will find the evidence to confirm all the times that I have been good enough, because there've been plenty of instances to support both. So we can essentially, we're telling our brain what we want to hear from it or what we need to hear from it.
Yeah. I think that kind of thinking should be really transformational for all of us, to realise that that it's within our own power to change our life, to change the way we think. It's not up to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to what you have said in other podcasts, that it is about taking control of your brain and your thoughts. And it really just shows us the power that our brain actually has to change our life. And it gives a whole new meaning to the fact that we can grow and change throughout our life. I love that quote by Gandhi too. It just starts with a very small thing, ends up as our destiny. So shows the importance of what we think really matters, because it influences our whole life, doesn't it?
Yeah, and another one from Gandhi that I love that we'll probably talk about in a future episode, but what the believer believes, the prover will prove. So if you believe it, your mind will prove it for you. And then, going back to what we were talking about before, repetition matters. The number of times you walk over that path matters, because just like when you go to the gym, repetition of exercises at the gym strengthens your muscles. Okay, you don't just rock up to the gym once or twice or even once a week and expect that at the end of 12 months you're going to have a bodybuilder's body. You have to go continually every day, doing repetition of exercises. You've got to mix it up. That's how you build muscles, and your brain is no different.
Yes, well, I think today's discussion has been, as I said, transformational. It gives us a sound basis to believe and realise that we're in charge, we can be in charge, and we can change the way we think, and we can transform our lives by changing the way we think.
That's right. Yeah. Our thoughts matter. So if they aren't serving us well, we need to change them. And that's why we're here to help you do that. So wrapping up, that's a little crash course in neuroplasticity today and your brain, the difference between your brain and your mind. And it demonstrates how powerful it is. And that's what we're here to talk to you about, is helping you revolutionize the way that you think and live so that you can see the world differently. So thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, your brain is your most powerful tool, and when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Brain Changers. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Our mission is to reach as many people as possible to help them revolutionize the way they think so they can change their brain and create profound transformation. Please help us broaden our reach by sharing this episode with someone you know will benefit. And remember to tag us on socials at Moonbeam Monday and leave a review. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll catch you next time for another episode of The Brain Changers.